You think carrying a few medical files makes you a real doctor? This hospital isn't a place for people like you to wander in and cause trouble.
That was how it began, in a hospital lobby, where a woman carrying medical files was treated like she didn't belong. The guard thought he was throwing out a nobody. He had no idea the board upstairs was waiting for her. Her name was Dr. Evelyn Carter, and that morning she walked into St. Mercy General Hospital alone. Dr. Evelyn Carter stepped through the sliding glass doors of St. Mercy General Hospital in Atlanta just after 8 in the morning, carrying an old leather folder against her chest. She was a black woman in her early 40s, tall, composed, and quietly elegant, with the steady eyes of someone who had spent half her life making impossible decisions under operating room lights. In Chicago, her name was spoken with respect. She was one of the best heart surgeons in the country. But that morning, no one saw the surgeon. They saw a woman in a plain beige coat, with tired eyes, wind-blown hair, and no white coat to announce who she was. Her flight had been delayed for hours. Her luggage had been sent to the wrong city. The navy suit she planned to wear for her first day as chief of surgery was somewhere between Chicago and Dallas. All she had were travel clothes, a folder of surgical files, and the official letter appointing her to the most powerful medical position in the hospital. Across the lobby, a young boy in a wheelchair watched her enter. His name was Noah Miller, a pale, thin 8-year-old with bright blue eyes and a blanket folded over his knees. Noah had been born with a serious heart condition, and St. Mercy was supposed to be his last chance. Beside him stood his mother, Sarah Miller, a worn but gentle woman in her mid-30s, whose face carried the exhaustion of too many hospital nights and too many unanswered prayers. Sarah's eyes narrowed slightly when she saw Evelyn. She had seen that face before. A magazine article, a medical interview, something about a miracle heart surgery in Chicago. Before Sarah could place the memory, a heavy voice cut through the lobby. "Excuse me, where do you think you're going?" Evelyn stopped. A security guard stepped in front of her, blocking the hallway that led toward the administrative elevators. His name was Frank Doyle, a broad-shouldered white man in his 50s with a red face, a gray uniform stretched tightly across his chest, and the kind of authority that came less from rules than from years of people being afraid to challenge him. "I'm here for a meeting with the board," Evelyn said calmly. "My name is Dr. Evelyn Carter." Frank looked her up and down, then laughed. "Doctor," he said. "Lady, you don't look like any doctor I've ever seen." A few people in the lobby turned. Near the reception desk, Dr. Marcus Reed froze with a paper coffee cup in his hand. Marcus was a young black surgical resident, only 29, sharp-minded and ambitious, but still new enough to the hospital to know fear. He had seen Frank humiliate patients before. He had also seen what happened to staff members who complained. They disappeared from good schedules. They lost recommendations. They became difficult. Marcus lowered his eyes. Evelyn reached into her coat pocket. "I have identification." Frank's hand shot out, stopping her wrist before she could pull it free. "No sudden moves," he snapped. Evelyn's expression changed only slightly. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes stayed level. "Remove your hand," she said. Frank leaned closer, his voice low enough to sound personal, but loud enough for others to hear. "You people always come in here with a story, a meeting, a sick relative, a fake emergency. Now you're carrying hospital files, too?" "These are surgical records," Evelyn said, "and you are interfering with hospital business." Frank smirked. "Hospital business? You expect me to believe the board is waiting for you dressed like that?" Behind him, a small security camera above the lobby entrance pointed strangely toward the ceiling, missing most of the main walkway. Frank had adjusted it earlier that morning, claiming it had been glitching. No one had questioned him. Noah shifted in his wheelchair. "Mom," he whispered, "why is he being mean to her?" Sarah placed a hand on his shoulder but didn't answer. She was staring at Evelyn now, her memory sharpening. Evelyn Carter, the surgeon, the woman they had been waiting for. Frank stepped even closer, blocking Evelyn completely from the elevators. "You're not going anywhere," he said. "Not until I find out what you're really doing here." Evelyn looked past him toward the boardroom level above the lobby. Then she looked back at Frank, calm as stone. And for the first time that morning, Frank Doyle made the mistake of thinking her silence meant fear. Frank Doyle kept one hand raised between Evelyn Carter and the elevators, as if he were holding back a threat instead of a woman with a folder. Then he turned toward the nurses' station and barked, "Get Linda down here! Now!" Within moments, Linda Pierce appeared from the side corridor. She was a white woman in her late 50s, sharp-faced and immaculate, with silver blonde hair pinned tightly behind her head and a badge that read, "Head Nurse." Everyone at St. Mercy knew Linda did not run the hospital officially, but plenty of people feared her more than the people who did. Linda's eyes swept over Evelyn's coat, her worn travel shoes, and the leather folder pressed against her chest. "What is this?" she asked, her voice cold. Frank tilted his chin toward the papers. "Caught her trying to get upstairs with hospital documents." Linda stepped closer and saw the St. Mercy logo stamped on the corner of several pages. Her expression hardened instantly. "Those are confidential medical files," she said, loudly enough for the lobby to hear. "Ma'am, you are in possession of restricted patient records. That is a very serious crime." Evelyn slowly reached toward her coat pocket again. "My identification will explain everything." But Frank grabbed her wrist before she could pull anything out. This time, he twisted harder. The leather folder slipped from her hand and struck the polished floor. Surgical charts, appointment notes, and hospital forms scattered across the lobby like white birds. One page slid all the way toward Noah Miller's wheelchair. Sarah bent down, saw her son's name printed near the top, and froze. Noah Miller, Pediatric Cardiac Surgical Review. Her breath caught in her throat. Linda saw Sarah looking and moved fast. "Do not touch those," she snapped. Then she turned to the growing crowd. "Everyone step back. This woman may be involved in a medical identity theft scheme." Several phones lifted into the air. A receptionist gasped. A visitor whispered, "Is she stealing patient files?" Evelyn did not shout. She did not beg. She only watched Linda, Frank, the cameras, the exits, and the hands reaching for phones. Her calmness made Sarah even more uneasy. This was not the look of someone caught committing a crime. It was the look of someone memorizing evidence. Near the janitor's closet, Mrs. Gloria Jenkins bent carefully to gather 2 loose pages that had slid beneath a bench. Gloria was a black woman in her 60s, small, soft-spoken, and usually invisible to the people who gave orders in the hospital. She had cleaned St. Mercy for 19 years and knew which voices were cruel when no supervisors were nearby. One of the pages she picked up was a handwritten surgical note with Evelyn Carter's name at the bottom. Gloria glanced from the signature to Evelyn's face. Instead of handing it to Linda, she folded the page once and tucked it beneath her cleaning clipboard. Dr. Marcus Reed stood near the coffee stand, his pulse hammering. He watched Linda lean close to Frank and whisper, "Say she threatened staff. Say she tried to run. No one is going to believe her." Marcus's stomach turned. For a second, fear held him still. Then he slid his phone from his coat pocket, opened the recorder, and lowered it beside his leg. Linda kept talking, unaware. "We'll write it up as a security breach. Tom will make it disappear before the board meeting." Marcus swallowed hard, knowing he had just crossed a line he could never uncross. Frank shoved Evelyn backward until her shoulder hit the wall beside the security desk. Noah flinched in his wheelchair, and Sarah stepped protectively in front of him. "Enough," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "I think she's here for my son." Linda shot her a warning look. "Mrs. Miller, stay out of this unless you want your son's surgery delayed again." The threat landed like a slap. Evelyn's eyes moved to Noah, then to Sarah, and something in her expression softened for one brief second. Frank grabbed her arm again and pointed toward the security hallway. "Move," he growled. Linda lifted her chin and announced to the lobby, "Take her to the security room." Frank pushed Evelyn Carter down a narrow hallway behind the security desk, his hand clamped around her upper arm as though he were escorting a dangerous criminal. Linda Pierce walked beside them with brisk, satisfied steps, already speaking into her phone. "Tom, we have a security breach in conference room C. Bring an incident form. And hurry, the board meets soon." Conference room C was small, windowless, and cold enough to feel intentional. A long plastic table sat beneath fluorescent lights. Evelyn was placed in the chair closest to the wall, while Frank stood near the door like a guard posted outside a cell. Linda gathered the scattered documents that had been shoved into a folder again and dropped them onto the table as if they were stolen goods. Tom Whitaker entered 2 minutes later. He was a polished white man in his mid-40s with an expensive watch, thinning brown hair, and the nervous smile of someone who had survived in administration by making problems disappear before they reached powerful ears. As St. Mercy's administrative manager, Tom controlled budgets, complaint files, internal reports, and access to the board. His suit looked calm, but his eyes did not. "What exactly happened?" Tom asked. Frank answered first. "She forced her way into the lobby carrying confidential medical files, claimed she was a doctor, tried to get upstairs. I did not force my way anywhere," Evelyn said evenly. Linda ignored her. "She had surgical records with patient names. This looks like fraud, possibly insurance-related. We should call the police." Tom's gaze flicked to the clock. "The board meeting starts in less than an hour. We are not turning the lobby into a crime scene before the announcement." He pulled a printed form from his folder and placed it before Evelyn. "The fastest solution is for you to sign this statement, acknowledging unauthorized entry, possession of restricted records, and refusal to comply with hospital security." Evelyn looked down at the paper. She did not touch the pen. The language was too familiar. Acting aggressively, refused to comply, created a safety concern, attempted to access restricted areas. The phrases were not just bureaucratic. They were patterned. Evelyn had read nearly identical wording in several internal complaints during her private review before accepting the position at St. Mercy. Patients had reported being shoved, humiliated, threatened, and then described in official reports as unstable or aggressive. Every complaint had ended the same way: insufficient evidence. Frank leaned over the table. "Sign it, and maybe we don't press charges." Evelyn raised her eyes to him. "Maybe?" Linda folded her arms. "Do not play smart. You are already in enough trouble." Tom rubbed his forehead, trying to stay composed. The last thing he needed was attention. For months, he had hidden the financial scandal under clean spreadsheets and committee language. A grant meant to upgrade pediatric cardiac equipment had been partly redirected into administrative restructuring, which meant vendor kickbacks, inflated purchase orders, and missing machines. Noah Miller's delayed surgery was one of the quiet consequences. Evelyn glanced at the patient's schedule attached to the folder. Noah's review had been postponed twice. A VIP surgical slot had replaced him both times. "So this is how it works," she said softly. Tom stiffened. "Excuse me?" Evelyn turned a page with the tip of one finger. "A patient complains. A report is written before the facts are checked. The same phrases appear. The same conclusion follows. The victim becomes the problem." Frank scoffed. "Listen to her. Now she's a lawyer too." Linda's eyes sharpened. "Tom, call the police." "No. Frank said confidently. Police slow things down. She signs the form, we ban her from the property, and this is finished. Tom pushed the pen closer to Evelyn. This is your chance to keep this from becoming worse. For the first time, Evelyn smiled faintly. It was not warm. It was not afraid. It was the smile of a surgeon who had found the source of the bleeding. She looked at Frank, then Linda, then Tom. Before I sign anything, she said, her voice calm enough to make the room feel even colder, are all of you absolutely certain you want these accusations recorded in an official hospital document? Inside conference room C, the pen still lay in front of Evelyn Carter like a trap waiting to close. Frank Doyle tapped the table with 2 fingers, growing impatient. Linda Pierce stood behind Tom Whitaker's chair, arms folded, her mouth tight with annoyance. Sign it, Frank said. You already made this worse for yourself. Evelyn looked at the form, then at the 3 people surrounding her. She did not raise her voice. If you intend to accuse me of trespassing, theft, fraud, and impersonating a physician, she said, then I am formally requesting preservation of all evidence from this morning. Tom blinked. You are requesting what? Evelyn leaned back slightly. Security footage, audio recordings, internal access logs, incident reports, handwritten notes, and any phone recordings made by staff or visitors. Out in the lobby, Sarah Miller's panic finally broke through her fear. Noah had gone pale in his wheelchair, one small hand pressed against his chest. Sarah knelt in front of him, brushing damp hair from his forehead. Noah, baby, breathe slowly. Noah tried to nod, but his lips trembled. Mom, is the doctor in trouble? The question struck Sarah harder than any accusation Linda had made. She stood abruptly and searched the lobby until she spotted Dr. Marcus Reed near the coffee stand. Marcus was a young surgical resident with tired eyes, a neat white coat, and the tense posture of a man who had spent too long choosing silence to survive. Sarah hurried toward him. You know who she is, don't you? She whispered. Marcus looked toward the security hallway, then away. I'm not sure. Sarah pulled the loose page she had seen earlier from beneath Noah's blanket, her hand shaking. This is my son's surgical review. Her name is on it. Dr. Evelyn Carter. She's the surgeon we've been waiting for. Before Marcus could answer, Mrs. Gloria Jenkins approached with her cleaning clipboard clutched tightly to her chest. Gloria, a quiet hospital custodian in her 60s, with kind eyes and silver threaded through her braids, glanced around before sliding 2 folded pages into Marcus's hand. These fell under the bench, she murmured. One of them looks important. Marcus unfolded the top page and went still. It was Evelyn's official appointment letter, signed by Dr. Amelia Grant. That name gave Marcus the courage his conscience had been begging for. He stepped into a supply alcove and called Dr. Amelia Grant, the chairwoman of St. Mercy's Board of Directors. Amelia was a black woman in her early 60s, elegant, disciplined, and known for turning failing medical institutions into respected ones without ever raising her voice. Dr. Grant, Marcus said quickly. There's a woman being held by security. She says she's Dr. Evelyn Carter. There was silence on the line. Then Amelia's voice dropped. Describe her. Marcus did. When he mentioned the old leather folder and the lost luggage, Amelia inhaled sharply. That is our new chief of surgery. Where is she? While Amelia moved through the executive floor, she ordered her assistant to check Evelyn's building credentials. The answer came back almost immediately. Evelyn's access card had been rejected at 7:58 a.m., before she even reached the main lobby. Amelia's face hardened. Rejected by whose authorization? The assistant hesitated. Administrative override. Amelia did not need to ask who had that level of access. At the same time, in a dim IT office 2 floors below, Ben Harper, a thin, anxious technician in his 30s with round glasses and a permanent coffee stain on his sleeve, noticed a deletion request tied to the lobby camera. Frank's login had erased the primary file, but Ben knew the backup server mirrored footage every 30 seconds. He quietly copied the file to an external drive. Back in conference room C, Linda pushed the pen toward Evelyn again. Last chance. Evelyn did not look at the pen. No, she said. Here is what will happen now. You will preserve the original incident form, the unsigned statement, all surveillance footage from the lobby and security corridor, all access card logs, and any audio recorded during this encounter. Frank laughed, but it sounded thinner than before. You don't give orders here. Evelyn's eyes moved to the red recording light on Marcus's phone as he appeared outside the glass panel in the door. Behind him stood Sarah, Gloria, and Amelia Grant, whose expression was cold enough to silence even Linda. Evelyn turned back to Frank and spoke calmly. You may want to reconsider that. The executive boardroom at St. Mercy General Hospital occupied the top floor, surrounded by glass walls that overlooked downtown Atlanta. Around the long mahogany table sat board members, department heads, legal counsel, and senior physicians waiting for Dr. Amelia Grant to announce the hospital's new chief of surgery. A silver nameplate had already been placed at the empty seat near the front. Dr. Evelyn Carter, chief of surgery. No one in the room knew that, minutes earlier, the woman whose name was on that plate had been held in a security room like a criminal. The doors opened before Amelia could begin. Evelyn Carter stepped inside. She no longer wore only the plain beige coat from the lobby. Over it, Amelia had placed a clean white doctor's coat from the executive suite. On her chest was a temporary hospital badge printed in bold letters. Dr. Evelyn Carter, Chief of Surgery. Her hair was still slightly wind-blown. Her shoulders still ached where Frank had shoved her into the wall. But she walked with such quiet authority that every conversation in the room died instantly. Behind her came Frank Doyle, Linda Pierce, and Tom Whitaker. Frank's face drained of color the moment he saw the nameplate waiting at the table. Linda's mouth opened, then closed again. Tom recovered first, forcing a strained, administrative smile. Dr. Carter, Tom said quickly, there appears to have been a procedural misunderstanding downstairs. Security was simply following protocol. Evelyn placed her old leather folder on the table. No, she said. A misunderstanding is when someone reads the wrong room number. What happened downstairs was assault, false accusation, witness intimidation, and an attempted cover-up. The room went still. Amelia Grant stood at the head of the table, her expression controlled but furious. Everyone will remain seated, she said. This board will review what happened before any announcement continues. At Evelyn's request, Sarah Miller and Noah were brought into the room. Sarah looked nervous beneath the gaze of so many powerful people, but she kept one hand firmly on Noah's wheelchair. Noah, pale but alert, stared at Evelyn with the fragile hope of a child, realizing the person in trouble might actually be the one person who could save him. Evelyn turned toward him briefly. Thank you for being brave, Noah. Then she looked at the board. Play the lobby footage. Ben Harper stood near the wall with a laptop connected to the large screen. He was visibly anxious, adjusting his glasses as he spoke. The primary lobby file was deleted from the main security console, he said, but the backup server stores mirrored footage every 30 seconds. Whoever deleted the original either didn't know that or forgot. Frank looked down. The screen lit up. The board watched Evelyn enter the lobby calmly. They watched Frank block her path. They heard his voice grow sharp. They saw him grab her wrist when she reached for identification. Then came the moment everyone in the room seemed to physically react to. Frank shoving the new chief of surgery into the wall while medical files spilled across the floor. A board member whispered, "My God." The video continued. Linda's voice rang through the speakers, accusing Evelyn of stealing confidential patient records. Then, Tom appeared, later on a corridor camera, guiding the situation away from public view, instead of asking for identification or checking credentials. Evelyn did not interrupt the footage. She let the silence do the work. When the video ended, Marcus Reed stepped forward. His hands trembled, but his voice held. "I have an audio recording," he said. "It was made after Nurse Pierce instructed Officer Doyle to claim Dr. Carter threatened staff." Linda snapped, "That's illegal." Amelia turned to her. "You should be more concerned with whether it is true." Marcus played the recording. Linda's voice filled the boardroom. "Say she threatened staff. Say she tried to run. No one is going to believe her." Sarah closed her eyes. Noah looked at his mother, confused and frightened. Across the table, 2 board members avoided looking at Linda. Tom lifted both hands weakly. "This is being taken out of context." Evelyn opened the incident form Tom had tried to make her sign and laid it beside Noah's surgical review, Gloria's recovered appointment letter, and the access card log Amelia had printed. "No," Evelyn said. "This is the context." She looked from Frank to Linda to Tom, then to the entire board. "What happened to me this morning was not an isolated mistake. It was a system. A guard confident enough to use force because complaints disappear. A head nurse comfortable enough to rewrite the truth because vulnerable families are afraid. An administrator prepared to turn a victim into a liability before the board could ask questions." Her eyes moved to Noah, and somewhere underneath all of that is a child whose surgery was delayed, while this hospital protected power instead of patience. No one spoke. For the first time since she had entered St. Mercy, every person in the room understood the same thing. Dr. Evelyn Carter had not come only to take a job. She had come to open the wound. Evelyn Carter remained standing at the front of the boardroom, her white coat bright beneath the cold ceiling lights. On the table before her lay the incident form, the access logs, Noah's surgical review, Marcus Reed's recording, and Ben Harper's copied footage. Then Evelyn opened a black folder Amelia Grant had brought from the executive archive. "Before I accepted this position," Evelyn said, "I was not only asked to lead the surgical department, I was asked to investigate St. Mercy from the inside." Several board members shifted in their seats. Evelyn looked at them one by one. "For 8 months, this hospital has been under quiet review for allegations of discrimination, insurance manipulation, and surgical scheduling abuse." She placed a chart on the screen. It showed 2 lines moving in opposite directions. "This is the average waiting time for cardiac surgery over the past 3 years," Evelyn said. "Patients with premium private insurance received surgical dates within 18 days on average. Patients on Medicaid or hospital assistance waited an average of 74 days. Sarah Miller gripped the handles of Noah's wheelchair. Evelyn clicked to the next slide. "When race and income are combined, the numbers become worse. Poor patients of color were delayed at nearly 4 times the rate of wealthy privately insured patients." Her voice hardened. This was not bad luck. This was policy disguised as scheduling. Then Evelyn turned to Noah. "Noah Miller's surgery was approved by medical review 2 weeks ago," she said. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "His condition was marked urgent. The operating room was available. I had already reviewed his file from Chicago and recommended immediate intervention." Evelyn lifted the page Gloria had saved from the lobby floor. "But his slot was removed and given to a VIP patient whose family made a major donation to the hospital foundation." Noah looked up at his mother, confused by the adult cruelty surrounding him. Sarah whispered, "They delayed him on purpose?" No one answered, because the answer was already on the screen. Evelyn opened another file. Frank Doyle has been named in 19 formal complaints involving excessive force against patients, visitors, and family members. Frank's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. 6 complaints involved elderly patients. 4 involved parents of children in emergency care. Every one was dismissed for insufficient evidence. From the back of the room, Mrs. Gloria Jenkins raised her hand slightly. Her voice was quiet, but steady. "My son was one of them." The room turned toward her. He came to the emergency room with a broken wrist. Frank shoved him face first into a vending machine because he asked why we had been waiting 6 hours. I filed a complaint. 2 weeks later, I was told there was no record of it. Marcus Reed stepped forward next. His face showed shame more than fear now. "Mrs. Jenkins isn't the only one," he said. "A lot of us knew things were wrong." Linda glared at him, but Marcus did not stop. Residents saw patients move down the list after insurance reviews. We heard nurses joke that poor families should be grateful for whatever date they got. We saw Frank drag people out of waiting rooms. He swallowed. "But young doctors here learn fast. If you speak up, your evaluations suffer. Your fellowship letters disappear. You become a problem." Evelyn nodded once, not excusing his silence, but recognizing the cost of breaking it. Finally, Evelyn turned to Tom Whitaker. "And then there is the money." Tom's face had become slick with sweat. Evelyn displayed invoices for pediatric cardiac equipment. Monitors never delivered, surgical tools billed twice, maintenance contracts paid to shell vendors. St. Mercy received a restricted grant to upgrade pediatric heart surgery resources, Evelyn said. But key equipment was delayed, downgraded, or never purchased. Amelia Grant, who had been silent for several minutes, stood slowly. She was composed, but her eyes were wet with anger. "The board failed these patients," she said. "We trusted reports that looked clean because they were written to look clean. We did not look underneath." Evelyn closed the black folder. "Today, we look underneath." Evelyn Carter closed the black folder, but no one in the boardroom moved. The silence had changed. Earlier, it had been shock. Now, it was shame. Frank Doyle stared at the table as if the polished wood might open and swallow him. Linda Pierce stood frozen beside the wall, her face rigid with anger. Tom Whitaker kept wiping his palms against his suit pants, but the sweat kept returning. Evelyn looked at Amelia Grant and spoke clearly. "Effective immediately. Frank Doyle, Linda Pierce, and Tom Whitaker are suspended from all duties pending criminal investigation. Their access cards, email accounts, and administrative privileges are to be disabled now." Amelia nodded to hospital counsel, who stepped into the hallway and began making calls. Evelyn did not wait for anyone to feel comfortable. "The evidence will be transferred today to the Georgia State Police, the Department of Health, and the Federal Prosecutor's Office." Tom stood so fast, his chair scraped the floor. "Dr. Carter, that is unnecessary. We can conduct an internal review." Evelyn turned to him. "Internal review is how this hospital buried complaints for years." She placed one hand on the folder. "That ends in this room." The boardroom doors opened again, but this time it was not another executive. 2 state officers entered with hospital legal counsel behind them. Frank's face went slack. One of the officers approached him. "Frank Doyle, you are being detained in connection with assault, falsification of an incident report, and obstruction of an internal investigation." Frank looked toward Linda as if she might save him. She did not move. The handcuffs clicked around his wrists in front of the same people who had once treated him like untouchable authority. Noah watched silently from his wheelchair, gripping his mother's hand. Linda tried to step toward the exit, but Amelia raised a hand. Not yet. Ben Harper connected another file to the screen. This time, it was not video. It was a chain of text messages between Linda and Tom, discussing surgery slots, donor families, insurance categories, and which patients could be safely delayed without media risk. One message from Linda read, "Move Miller, foundation case takes priority." Sarah covered her mouth. Linda's composure cracked. "You don't understand how hospitals work," she snapped. Evelyn's voice was quiet. "We understand exactly how you made this hospital work." A second officer escorted Linda from the room. Tom backed away from the table, shaking his head. "I only followed budget instructions." Amelia's eyes narrowed. "You signed vendor approvals for equipment that never arrived." Evelyn added another document to the table. "And when complaints connected your missing equipment to delayed surgeries, you deleted the reports." Tom's knees seemed to weaken. He was taken out moments later, not shouting like Linda or glaring like Frank, but whispering that he could explain everything if someone would just listen. By afternoon, word had spread beyond the executive floor. In the main lobby, former patients and family members began appearing with folders, photographs, discharge papers, and old complaint forms. An elderly man brought a copy of a report that said he had been combative after Frank shoved him outside the emergency room. A young mother carried records showing her daughter's surgery had been delayed 3 times after insurance review. Mrs. Gloria Jenkins stood near them, holding her clipboard like a shield. Evelyn walked to her and said, "Mrs. Jenkins, this hospital needs someone on the oversight committee who knows what people have been afraid to say." Gloria's eyes widened. "Me?" Evelyn nodded. "You." Marcus Reed stood apart from the crowd, still shaken by what he had risked. Evelyn approached him next. "Dr. Reed, you will not be punished for telling the truth." Marcus swallowed hard. "I should have spoken sooner." Evelyn studied him for a moment. "Then speak sooner from now on." She assigned him to the internal reform team, not as a reward, but as a responsibility. Amelia announced a patient compensation fund for families delayed, mistreated, or wrongly documented by the hospital's old system. Only then did Evelyn return to Sarah and Noah. The boy looked exhausted, but his eyes followed her like she was the first safe thing he had seen all day. Sarah whispered, "What happens to my son now?" Evelyn knelt slightly so she was level with Noah. "What happens now," she said, "is that we stop letting paperwork decide whether a child gets to live." She looked at Sarah, then back at Noah. "Noah's surgery will not be delayed another day." 3 months later, the entrance lobby of St. Mercy General Hospital no longer felt like the same place. The security desk had been moved into plain view of 3 cameras. Complaint forms were displayed beside patient rights posters in English and Spanish. Every employee, from surgeons to janitors, had completed new training on patient dignity, bias, and abuse of authority. The hospital had changed because the truth had finally become too loud to bury. Frank Doyle, once feared in those hallways, was sentenced to prison for assault, falsifying an incident report, and obstruction of an investigation. Linda Pierce lost her nursing license after the state board confirmed she had manipulated surgery schedules and endangered vulnerable patients. Tom Whitaker received a prison sentence for fraud, destroying records, and diverting funds meant for life-saving equipment. But for Sarah Miller, none of that mattered as much as the sound of her son laughing. Noah's surgery had taken 9 hours. Dr. Evelyn Carter had led the operation herself, standing beneath the surgical lights with the same calm focus she had shown the morning Frank tried to break her. When the procedure was over, she walked into the waiting room, removed her mask, and told Sarah the words she had prayed to hear for years. "His heart is strong." Sarah collapsed into Evelyn's arms and cried like a woman who had been carrying fear for too long. Weeks later, Noah Miller walked down the main hospital corridor without his wheelchair for the first time. Nurses stopped. Doctors stepped aside. Even strangers turned to watch. His steps were slow, uneven, and careful, but they were his. Sarah walked behind him with both hands over her mouth, tears running freely down her face. At the end of the hallway, Evelyn waited in her white coat. Noah reached her, breathing hard but smiling proudly. Then he handed her a folded drawing. It showed Evelyn standing in a bright white coat with a stethoscope around her neck. Behind her, in crooked, childlike letters, he had written, "The doctor who came like an angel." That afternoon, the hospital held a ceremony in the renovated cardiac wing. The old sign was removed, and a new one was revealed. The Evelyn Carter Center for Equal Care. The applause shook the hallway. Dr. Marcus Reed stood among the staff, no longer hiding at the edge of the room. He had become the physician representative for St. Mercy's new whistleblower protection program, making sure no young doctor would ever again have to choose between a career and the truth. Mrs. Gloria Jenkins stood beside him, wearing a small gold pin the hospital had given her for courage and service. For 19 years, people had treated her like she was invisible. That day, the entire hospital stood to honor her. Amelia Grant also announced the first payments from the Patient Compensation Fund. Families whose complaints had vanished were finally being heard. Surgeries delayed by greed were being reviewed. Records that had once been altered to protect powerful people were corrected in public. Sarah spoke briefly, her voice trembling as she said, "My son was not just saved by medicine. He was saved because someone refused to look away." Evelyn did not smile widely, but her eyes softened. She knew justice was never complete in one day. But that day, it had taken root. Later, when the crowds were gone, Evelyn returned to her new office overlooking the hospital entrance. She placed Noah's drawing on the wall across from her desk, where she would see it every morning. It was not there to remind her that she was a hero. It was there to remind her of the hallway, the insults, the hands that tried to push her down, and the child whose life had almost been delayed by corruption. Evelyn looked at the drawing, then at the lobby below, where patients now walked past cameras, signs, and staff trained to serve them with dignity. She understood then that justice did not only live in courtrooms or boardrooms. Sometimes, justice began in a hospital hallway, when one underestimated woman refused to bow her head. Evelyn Carter never forgot the morning she was judged, before she was even known. Not by her work, not by her heart, not by the lives she had saved, but by the color of her skin and the clothes she wore. Racism did not begin with one cruel guard or one corrupt nurse. It lived in every silence, every ignored complaint, every moment when good people were too afraid to speak. But that day, one woman stood tall, and because she refused to bow, a child was saved, victims were heard, and an entire hospital was forced to change. So tell us in the comments, if you had been standing in that lobby, would you have stayed silent, or would you have spoken up for Evelyn? If this story touched your heart, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more powerful, emotional, and unforgettable stories.